710 KURV Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the Iron Microphone, streaming live on KURV.com, 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. We're here to illuminate your life, and our opinion is based upon investigation and not just mindless blather or whatever comes to one's mind, as is so often heard throughout the media. And there was this little discussion earlier on with Sergio Sanchez, and he was talking about what you can or cannot say or should not say about anybody or anything. And the way I look at it is this, that though it may be painful, the more you know, the better off you are. And so if a speaker tends to be or is offensive to something that you believe in, if says something which you think is repulsive, isn't it better to know the character of the speaker than for that speaker to hide behind a facade which is not real? If the speaker says something about a particular race or culture, doesn't that say more about the one who is speaking than about the race or the culture? There's a person who called in and said that the Bible admonishes those who would speak ill of others not to do so, and only to speak good about others, and if you cannot, do not speak at all. That is the dream of every dictator, is it not? That no one is allowed to speak ill of them. And in a number of countries, if you do, as in North Korea and other nations run by dictators and tyrants, speaking ill of someone can land you into a whole lot of trouble. I don't think the Bible says anything along those lines whatsoever. And so but on the other hand, if you are the responsible medium for the purveying of an idea, then maybe you might be held responsible for that. For instance, I heard a commercial on these exalted stations about food.org or something like that. I guess it's commercial time that is paid for, but doesn't the medium have a certain responsibility? Because if you broadcast an organization or the views of an organization that says something, and you accept payment for allowing them the airtime, do you have any responsibility that, as the provider of the medium, whether it is the airwaves or the print medium or aren't you responsible for what is being said? Don't you cast an aspect of legitimacy on the organization if you, even at pay, if you have them broadcast their views on your medium which you own? The food.org organization is a phony baloney organization. The CEO of the organization makes over $600,000 a year. If you go to their website, you cannot donate food. In the section talks about donate food, you can donate money. And then they convert money into the amount of food they say they're selling. If you go to their website, they talk a lot about fundraising. And if you go to their organization's media blurbs, they make a big deal about the money that they raise and really don't go into the detail of how they dispense food. Is the food.org organization, are they a money-making outfit, or is their goal to dispense food? And if the goal is to dispense food, excuse me, why don't they talk about that instead of how much money they make? But it's the mythology that we're all prone to because we just believe what we hear. If the government says the world is flat, we believe it's flat. And if they say something else, we believe that. So, because it brings us to the issue, do you respect the president, or do you respect the senator or congressman or a teacher or anyone else in a position of authority? Why? The person is to be respected, not the position. Are we to respect uh, the viewpoint of Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin because they are the leaders of their country? Are we to respect the viewpoint of Barack Obama because he's the president of the United States? Why? The everything's backwards. The way it's supposed to be is that the position is supposed to be filled by somebody that adheres to the uh, responsibilities of the position in a proper manner. If someone takes over a country through coup or violence, is that simply because that person is a new dictator? Is that person to be respected simply because he's a new dictator? Does the president need to be respected simply because he's president? No, because they have it backwards. You become president because you're worthy of becoming president. It is not the presidency which is the worthy thing. It is a person becoming president. It is a position which is a person is worthy of. If Barack Obama is not worthy to be president, then he's not. Then why respect? Right, but why respect him? So we blind obedience is there's no righteousness in blind obedience. No one seems to want to look at the facts of things. We just accept what is told. The United States is the most obese country in the world by far. The obesity rate in the United States is 10 times that of Japan. Clinically, obesity does not simply mean being overweight. It means being overweight to the extent that there is a physiological detriment to the body. That's very severe. And apparently in the United States, somewhere around 30% of the people are classified as obese. That is far more than any other nation in the world. And also, curiously, a very high proportion of those on welfare are obese. Those receiving food stamps or other welfare programs seem to be more obese than the average population. Well, of course, there's reason for that. The ones on welfare are not working. They don't do anything. And they go out and buy food, and they overeat, and they buy junk food, and they overeat that too much because they're uneducated. And by being uneducated, of course, they're willfully uneducated. No one needs to be uneducated unless they desire to be so. You don't have to go to public school to become educated. Far from it. You're probably better off not going to public school if you want to be properly educated. But so if you're not educated, that's a willful process. You don't wish to be educated because the resources of education are plentiful and relatively inexpensive or oftentimes free. Information is there for the taking for those who have the gumption to look for it. But most on the welfare system do not, which is the reason on the welfare system to begin with. The welfare system now encompasses a significant proportion of the United States, probably 25% or more. 50 million Americans are on food stamps. That's a full 1/6 of the population. So when we're looking at organizations such as these food collecting organizations, what are they in business for? They're in business for themselves. There is no hunger in the United States unless you're talking about the hunger that you have between breakfast and lunch. So it's complete and utter nonsense. Now there may be malnutrition, but malnutrition is not because of a lack of proper food products available. It's because of ignorance or tastes or desires that you eat or that someone will consume food products which have no nutritional value. But we're not talking about that, are we? Because I don't hear anything very much about organizations promoting nutrition, just food, and these organizations are much more interested in collecting money than in dispensing food or at least proper food products. And so it's always better to know the truth. It's always better to know the truth. It's always better to know the what another person really is. They were talking about this model. I don't know who that person is. I didn't watch the Oscars. I don't need to watch, the commissars in the Politburo to know what communists are. I don't need to be listening to the Nazis legislature, Reichstag, to know what the Nazis are. And I don't need to be watching the Oscars to know what they are. And they are simply the same, aren't they? Mindless blather of feeble-minded individuals purveying their particular brand of belief, disconnected from reality. And so there was really no purpose of doing that. So I don't know who that model was, but just because you're Jewish doesn't mean that you or your family have suffered privations because of Nazism or anything else. So that's a common misnomer, especially in the United States. There are many, many people Jews in the United States who were not at all affected by the Nazis. In fact, most of Jews in the United States that were here during the war did nothing to help the Jews either during the war, and did nothing to help the Jewish refugees after the war. So let's not, simply by the fact that they happen to be born Jewish, they have any particular insight. But it's always better to know people. You can judge people and know what they are. So the more that individuals are allowed to speak about things, the more we learn about them, and then we decide whether that's someone we ought to be giving credibility to or not on an individual basis. Let's talk a little bit about logic. Let's talk a little about healthcare and the logic of healthcare and all the blather that goes on in our society today. Healthcare, they say, is the most important thing that we have, and therefore only the government is capable of dispensing it in a proper manner, because only the government and the bureaucrats in government have the brains to do that, because the American people do not. If anyone believes that Barack Obama or George Bush or Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi has more brains than you do, then if you believe that, then it's probably true. They do have more brains than you, because there's fewer people more brainless, in my opinion, than George Bush or Barack Obama or Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or any of that ilk. And interestingly enough, the longer they remain as politicians, the more ignorant they become, because it's hard to teach anyone who is arrogant. People are arrogant, think they know everything they need to know. And if there's a personification of arrogance, it's Barack Obama. And so the blather about health care, they say health care is the most important thing. And however, it consumes 15% of the gross domestic product. And that's too much. Well, if health care is so important, what's so important about the 85% of the gross domestic product that is not consumed by health care? If health care is the most important thing, then what's so important about the other 85% that is not, of the gross domestic product, which is not consumed by health care? If health care is so important, why does it need to be rationed? And the rationing, of course, is arbitrarily determined by the government. The government's going to ration health care. If it's so important, why does a bureaucrat determine the limits of the health care you can receive? Let's talk a little bit more about the logic. Let's talk about the quality of United States health care. The United States health care system is the best in the world by far. Despite all the government, all the burdens placed upon the healthcare system by government, all the unnecessary expenditures government forces upon healthcare, all the red tape and obstructions the government places forward on places before the healthcare industry in their delivery of the healthcare product. The United States healthcare is still by far the best in the world, and there really isn't a second place. There really is not a second place. Let's take a look at a few facts, shall we? What I find interesting is the very same people who say that there's significant problems with the system of healthcare in the United States as compared to other nations will freely admit the United States has more of everything in healthcare. We have more specialists. We have more technology, more hospitals, more hospital beds. We do more procedures on more people than anyone else in the world. We have more of everything per capita than anyone else in the world. More MRIs per capita, more CAT scans per capita, more cardiac cath labs per capita, more hospital beds per capita, more specialists per capita, more everything per capita. So whatever lack there may be as far as access, the bottom line is that if you have more of everything per capita than anyone else, then obviously the United States must have better access. Hospitals and other entities do not buy machinery and technology to have them sit in a corner unplugged. Individual physicians do not go into specialties such as heart surgery or gastroenterology in order not to utilize their specialty. And so since we have more gastroenterologists per capita, more neonatologists per capita, more heart surgeons per capita, more cardiac cath labs per capita, etc., then clearly the United States, the access, and whatever fault there may be in access, that our access to health care in this country is greater than any other countries. So we can put aside the access issue. We can put aside the quality issue. Let's talk about the cost of health care and denial of access. Who in the United States is denied health care? It doesn't exist. No one in the United States is denied health care, and people say, what is wrong with me? Obviously, people are denied health care in the United States. Where are they denied health care? Individuals may choose not to receive health care for whatever reason, because they think money is more important to them than their health, and don't think that is so unusual. I don't know what makes everyone thinks that health is uppermost in their mind, and I'll bring you the example of skydiving. If health care is the most important thing uppermost in everyone's mind, then why do we play football? Why do we skydive? Why do we take drugs? Why do people take cocaine and smoke? Why do people overeat? If health is the most important thing, why do we do all these things which cost, which are certainly deleterious to our health? Let's get over that nonsense that health is the most important thing to everybody. That's not true. Other things take precedence. Other things take precedence beyond health insurance. Prefer to buy a car, prefer to go to a basketball game, prefer to buy Twinkies. Many things take precedence over buying health care insurance. Health insurance is not the most expensive thing in our budgets. Other things are more expensive, which we prefer to pay for versus health care. So let's get over this nonsense. Everybody thinks that health care is so critically important to their life. It's not true. Oh, yeah, when you're sick. If you're sick, then you want to be taken care of, but only when you're sick. Otherwise, you really don't give it that much thought. So it's all a bunch of blather that's going on in the media about health care. The United States system of health care is the best. It is no other nation in the world provides no-cost health care to non-citizens. No non-citizen of Germany or Canada or any other country will have access to health care. No other country provides no-cost health care outside the United States. You say, well, in Canada, I can go into the emergency room. I don't have to pay any money. Well, that's true. You don't directly, but somebody does. And they take it out of your taxes, and that doctor is paid. The doctor in Canada is paid for every single patient that he or she sees. That doctor is paid in one and through either salary or some other payment scheduling. They are paid. Only in the United States will a doctor see a patient without expectation of pay. Only in the United States will a hospital take care of a patient without the expectation of pay. No other country does that. Yet we are categorized as greedy. What is your life worth? What is your life worth? Why is all this concern about money? What was the cost of heart surgery in 1960? It was very low, wasn't it? But why was that? Because there was no heart surgery. What would you rather have? Low cost, no heart surgery or high cost heart surgery? Is your life not worth $50,000? If you had the option, if someone came to you and said, I will grant you 20 years of life for $50,000, what would you do? If you were on death's door and someone came to you at your deathbed and said, I will grant you 20 years more of life for $50,000, what would you do? If someone went to Bill Gates and told him, I will grant you 20 years more of life for $1 billion, what would Bill Gates do you suppose? I imagine he'd be writing the check for $1 billion or maybe $10 billion. So the fact of the matter is that it's a question of priorities, isn't it? And we don't seem to understand. Now, if you had heart disease in 1965, you were dead. That was it. Not only were you dead, the time that you lived, you were living miserably. In 1970, almost 2 million people a year died from heart disease in the United States. Today, with a population 50% bigger, only about 800,000 people die per year from heart disease. So 1 million more people live today that would have died if they had the disease in 1970. What other nation can say that? Canada is brought forward as the example of a healthcare model we should follow. How many cardiac care units are there in Canada per capita? There is one cardiac care unit in Canada for every 1.2 million people. In the United States, there's a cardiac care unit for every 100,000 people. Robotic assist surgery is the standard of care for prostate cancer. How many robotic assist devices are there in Canada for the 34 million people? They have 8. 8 in Canada for 34 million people. The United States has not quite 10 times more the number of people. We have 200 times more the number of units. We have 1,600 robotic assist devices in the United States compared to Canada's 8, compared to China's 3. Talk about a waiting line. And so what has priority in your life? Your money or your health? Or if you prefer it this way, what is more important in your life, your money or the health of your children? The United States has more neonatal units, more neonatologists, more neonatal beds than all the rest of the world combined. Yet we only have 1/24th of the world's population. Yet we have more neonatal units and physicians than all the rest of the world combined. So what we hear in the media is all nonsense and blather and lies regurgitated by the paid liars such as Katie Couric and Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, and all the rest of the bobbleheads that inundate our airways with their propagandist lies. The healthcare in the United States is the best by far. There is no second place. There is not a country in the world in which a city of 100,000 will have a cardiac care unit. Doesn't exist outside the United States. There's no other place in the world in which you're living in a city of 100,000 people that you will have a cardiac care unit. But in the United States, it's very common. There's no country in the world where a city of 100,000 will have a CAT scan or an MRI machine outside the United States, where a city of 100,000 will have a number of MRIs and CAT scanners. Most of the rest of the world, if you need heart surgery or heart procedure, you have to go to a regional center, sometimes hundreds of miles away from where you live. You may very well die in transit, and that's what their government counts on. And that's what they want to do in this country as well. They want to create these regional centers so that hopefully by the time you get there, you'll be dead and you won't be an expense to a government insurance program. But the lies and the nonsense just fill our airways, and we then make our decisions and form our opinions based upon the lies that we hear and see. Why doesn't anyone bother to take a little bit more of an in-depth look into the reality of the situation? I defy anyone to go to Houston, Texas, or Birmingham, Alabama, or San Antonio, Texas, and see any medical centers in the world which approach those centers, or many other centers in the United States, whether you go to Lincoln, Nebraska, or Los Angeles, California, or Miami, or or Rochester, Minnesota, or Rochester, New York. I defy anyone to find anywhere else in the world medical centers which approach those medical centers, and you will not find that. We have John calling from McAllen, 7th KRV. Thanks for calling, John.
According to the president, we got to shut a whole bunch of things down now.
Good.
It's going to affect. Yeah. I mean, it's just about time. I mean, they should shut a whole bunch of programs down that are wasting taxpayers' money.
Right, but you see, they're not wasting taxpayers' money. They're being diverted to the friends, relatives, cronies, and contributors of Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer. That's why those programs need to be in existence, because the money is being misappropriated and funneled to the friends of politicians.
Well, sure. It's like you got, we're going to ban diet pop now, or this pop in New York, smaller portions.
Are you from the North? John, are you from the North? Because when you say the word pop, I know you're not from the South, because that's the way.
No, I'm from Minnesota.
Yeah, sure, of course.
There.
I knew it. It's a giveaway, because down here it's soda. When you say the word pop, I know you're not from here. You're from up north.
No, I'm from that place where you got Fargo on one side, Moorhead on the other side, and the Mayo Clinic up in Rochester.
The Mayo Clinic, yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Well, yeah. I mean, according to him, we're going to shut everything down. Maybe they should.
That would be great, because all the government is a big vacuum cleaner sucking up all our money. So
that's all it is. You take the FAA. Reagan fired all those people one time. Let them all go again. I mean, what difference does it make? The planes will still fly.
It's interesting you bring that up. If you watch, Johnny, you watch you watch a movie from 1965, right?
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
And like Airport, what's the movie? Airport, around 1970. Yeah. Do you notice that the stagnation in the airline industry? That essentially what they were doing back then, we're doing now. Let's take a look at our communications industry, or the free market, like computers, cell phones, and all that. Look at the advances that have happened in those industries, or in healthcare for that interest, for that matter. Look at healthcare today compared to 1965 or 70.
Well, yeah, now you got heart transplants, and you got this. They can keep you alive on dialysis.
But the airline industry hasn't changed one bit. The planes look, and you know why? Because it's under government control. The planes are no faster. The service is no better. It's not modernized at all. They're doing it today exactly the same way they did 45 years ago.
Well, it's a little better when Lindbergh was flying, though.
Yeah, but that was 1920. When was that? 1929 or something?
That was between the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Well, yeah, it's better now, but you know why? Because the government wasn't involved back then.
No, now it is.
That's the
now
difference.
You have the government carrying mail, for God's sakes, and if you think the mail is on a separate deal, it's all on the same plane.
Sure, it's the Pony Express. It's the same stuff. Look at what the government has control of stagnates. Of course, it has a stagnate. What does Barack Obama or George Bush? Well, George Bush was a pilot, actually. But what does Barack Obama know about the airline industry? Yet the government is in charge of the airline industry. They dictate what an airport can do, where an airport can be located. They dictate the speed of the airplanes. They dictate all that junk. Oh, have to go to a break. Okay, John, thanks for calling. Appreciate it. Have to go to a break. I'll get to Dan if he wants to hang on after this break. not very long break. Okay, back 7 on KRV, Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, back after the break. Okay, we're back. 7 on KRV, Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the Iron Microphone. We'll take this call from Dan, calling from Edinburgh. Thanks for calling. What do you have to say?
Hey, Dr. Gelman, it's always a pleasure. I love your show. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm here to think that half of all bankruptcies or medium those
I don't know if you're calling for myself. I can't hear. It's all garbled.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you want to call back from another line. I don't think it's us. Okay, so healthcare costs more today than before because we have a product we never had before. Nothing is less expensive than nothing. And so in 1970, there were no hip or knee implants, no significant blood pressure medications or heart medications, no heart surgery, no angioplasties, no MRIs, no CAT scan, no fiber optics, no lasers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, no radiation therapy. We are so far advanced, but that costs, right? Because we have a product. There is no product that then is inexpensive, but we have a product, and that's why it costs. What are we complaining about? For God's sakes, right now we are saved routinely by the medical community for diseases which routinely knock people off. Now we take it for granted we're going to be saved. 50 years ago, people took it for granted they were going to die. If you had heart disease for 5,000 years, you were dead. Now, in our generation, if you have heart disease, it's hardly more than a minor inconvenience anymore. You live another 20 years. Okay, now we got Dan again. Let's see if it's any better. 7 on KRV.
Hey, Dr. Gelman.
Yeah.
Like I say, I love your show. Thanks for having me on. I just heard a statistic, and correct me if I'm wrong. They say that half of all bankruptcies are medical bill related, and half of those are people that had insurance. I just want to see what your thoughts on someone who pays their insurance monthly, and then some kind of catastrophe happens, your child gets sick. These people are financially ruined. They're not the kind of people that can write a big check out of their excess.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Should that be fixed? I think
But it's not. The thing is, that's not true. I mean, we have a hospital. We have never sent anyone into bankruptcy. What you're talking about is a little scam that the bankruptcy lawyers have, in which they just file bankruptcy claims in order to get rid of any debt, because there are people who just don't want to pay their debt. 95% of all businesses go under in their first year. It's got nothing to do with health care. You I don't know, you go to your neighborhood and you see a restaurant is open today and closed tomorrow, and a little store is open today and closed tomorrow. So when you talk, those kind of statistics are really nonsensical, because look, unlike if you go to a furniture store, for example, and you buy some furniture and you have it on a loan, they can charge you interest. If you go to healthcare industry, if you go to a doctor or a hospital and you have and you owe them money, they cannot charge you interest. Furthermore, they're limited as to what they can do to get the money out of you. And it's very expensive to go through the process of trying to collect money to the extent that the person is forced to file bankruptcy. It's really not worth it for the hospital to go through, or a doctor especially. I mean, there's no possible way a doctor is charging enough that it would be worth their while to go through the system of lawyers and bankruptcy courts, which would be necessary in order to go after someone's money. It costs money to collect money. So that kind of stuff that you're hearing is garbage. It's government made up garbage. I don't know anyone who's ever. I know people gone bankrupt. I've never heard anyone going bankrupt because of health care bills, and it's simply not true. Well, let me just say this on a philosophical note. If you buy a product, whether it is a television, a car, a house, or health care, then you are responsible to the person producing that product. I mean, why should the fruits of somebody's labor not be rewarded? If I provide a service, why should I not get paid? If I am an air conditioning company, and I provide a product, then who would deny me that I should be paid for the product that I put in? If I'm a technician and go to your house and fix your air conditioner or your sink, why should I be denied payment? I mean, why do we?
I agree, but do you think the insurance company is responsible for making that payment, or do you think it should come out of someone's?
Well, it depends on your insurance company, right? I mean, if you have automobile insurance, if you don't, and that has certain stipulations, deductibles, and all that, and you're required to meet those stipulations. If you're an insurance company, let's say, of an automobile insurance company, and you are negligent in, let's say you're driving drunk, and you run into somebody or whatever, the insurance company may not pay because they're not obligated to pay for your own negligence. I mean, it kind of depends on what the insurance is now, right? I mean, that you would think that would be justified, that if you're a drunk driver and you drive drunk, which is illegal, is the insurance company required to cover your costs when you commit a felony? And so, I mean, there are limitations, and justifiably so. The insurance companies have a certain responsibility. That's true, but they also have a responsibility to stay in business, and so there are proper business practices which must be performed. So if I buy health insurance and I want to pay less, so I have a bigger deductible and bigger copay, then of course I'm responsible to meet the deductible and copay. But that's a voluntary deal, isn't it? It's voluntary. Now compare that to Medicare, which is involuntary. Now, I am not allowed. You can't get out of the Medicare system. Medicare increases their premiums. Medicare increases for Part B. Medicare increases the copay. Medicare decreases reimbursement. Medicare increases their deductible, as they have done. It is now a $6,000 a year deductible. A lot of people don't know that. And they can't get out of it. Is that just? I mean, if an insurance company doesn't meet its obligation, I can go look for another insurance company. And insurance companies that don't meet their obligations go out of business. When does the government go out of business for not meeting its obligations?
Never. Just raises taxes.
Oh, anything else?
That's it. Thanks, Dr. Gelman. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for calling. And so it's all of these things which people don't even think about. Okay? Another thing is, just because you don't have insurance doesn't mean you don't have access to health care. Everyone has access to health care. The complaints I always hear about the cost of it, but a car costs more. What's more important, your car or your health? Well, if your car is more important, then fine. But, cars cost more than health care. How about education? What's the education cost in the United States? The public education in the public universities is getting near $20,000 a year. Private in the universities, $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Isn't that a lot more than health insurance? How come no one complains about that? You go to 4 years to an Ivy League school, that's $200,000, not counting room and board. $200,000. Well, for $200,000, you can get 40 years of an individual can get 40 years of health insurance. I might wonder what is the better product, considering what graduation from college these days. Well, how come no one complains about the increased cost in college? When my daughter started college, it was $19,000 a year. That was 1999 or something. Now it's $40,000 a year. Well, what's that all about? So, not counting all the other increased costs of everything ancillary to that. It's all a bunch of nonsense the government talks about. But there's an ulterior motivation, and that motivation is simply this: they want to justify the taking over of the healthcare system. And so they have to make it appear to be something which is not run properly, and that the government can run it better. Yeah, don't make me laugh. Can you imagine George Bush administering your health care? Would you go to George Bush to tell you how to for heart surgery? I don't think so. Think George Bush knows anything about heart surgery, even the basic rudimentary of the theory of it? But now that we're talking about a psychology of people, does psychology of individuals change? Well, no. The human psychology is the same today. It's been since the first human came into existence. All of our emotions, all of the things that we do, gluttony and pride, arrogance, wrath and lust and all this other stuff, it's the same. We're all the same. Let's take a look at the Bible a little bit here. Let's take a look at Exodus. Let's took a little phrase out of Exodus I was looking at. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord, and they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is it not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. What are they saying? They prefer to be slaves than to risk their lives by being freed. Do you think people are different today? Isn't someone on food stamps prefer to be a slave than to be on their own? Isn't someone on welfare prefer to be a slave? Someone on Medicare and Medicaid prefer to be a slave? Those on Social Security prefer to be a slave? Now, it's not really fair for Social Security and Medicare because those are involuntary programs, which brings us to another question. If these programs are so great, why are they involuntary? If Social Security is so great, why is it involuntary? If Medicare is so great, why is it involuntary? If you think something is great, don't you voluntarily get it, participate, buy it? If you think it's great, are you forced to buy something that is great? Do you need to be forced, your arm twisted with a gun to your head, to buy something you think is great? Of course not. Well, if Medicare and Social Security is so great, why are we forced to participate? Well, let's go back to human nature. What makes you think that people want to be free and not be slaves? What makes you think that? What makes anyone think? What historical evidence do you have of that? Look at the way we fawn over kings and queens and princes and princesses. Look at the way we fawn over the useless Barack Obama or who is the prince in England? I don't even know what his name is. Why do we fawn over them? Why do we fawn over Fidel Castro or Hugo Chavez? Why do we fawn over Brad Pitt? I mean, why do we do that if it's not our natural inclination to fawn over these people? In the United States, I wonder why they don't do a Gallup poll that says, well, how many of you would like to see Barack Obama president for life? I would think 25 to 40% of the American people would go for that. Why does the news media ask Barack Obama what he's going to do about the economy? But Barack Obama's never had a job, let alone run a business or an economy. Why isn't Barack Obama the coach of a football team? Why do the presidents not become coaches of football teams or baseball teams? They don't know what the heck they're doing. And nobody would hire them because they would be ridiculous. But yet, even though Barack Obama cannot coach a high school football team, the media asks him to run the country, and the people out there ask him to run the country. What he has done that's so great for the country. What has Barack Obama invented? Did he invent a light bulb or a phonograph? Did he invent any cures for any diseases? He created a new antibiotic, new automobile, new airplane, new anything? Did he create anything at all? Barack Obama's been great for the country. What did he do? He's done nothing. He's hurt it a lot, but he's done nothing. When was the last time a politician invented anything other than a concentration camp? But, talking about human psychology, let's look at another little thing, Samuel. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel and said unto him, You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, Give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me. Samuel then goes to the people and says to them, This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters. Do you know Bill Clinton? He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials. What a piker! Today they take 50%. Anyway, back to the Bible. And attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us, then we will be like all other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. Really? Is it the king that fights your battles? How many kings get knocked off compared to everybody else that gets knocked off fighting a king's wars of conquest? When Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord, and the Lord answered, listen to them and give them a king. 3,000 years ago, maybe longer. That's when that story was written. Have we changed? Is not Barack Obama our king? Do not the people lust to be his king, his servants? Isn't the black community just want to be the servants of Barack Obama? Isn't that why 95% of them vote for him? That is the world. That is the way people are. We want to be taken care of. We want to be servants. We want to be slaves. Not me, not some, but many. And when the United States, when the Revolutionary War was won by the colonists over the imperialist aristocratic regime of King George III and the British aristocracy, 100,000 New Yorkers packed up and moved to Canada so they could continue to be ruled by a king. Now, think about that for a moment. 100,000 people is a lot today. Back then is an awful lot. And they preferred to live under a king than to live free. So there are people who prefer to live under Barack Obama than to live free. People prefer to live under Hitler than to live free. People prefer to live under Castro than to live free. People prefer to live under Stalin than to live free. Nothing unusual there. In the United States, are we free? We're not free. We're no freer than in any other dictatorship. Do you think the people in other countries are locked up every single day? No, the vast majority go about their fare, their business, their lives, whatever life they live. They limited options and limited volitional action. But if you remain within the confines of what the government permits, then they leave you alone. Is our country different? Go take cocaine and see what happens to you. Smoke marijuana, see what happens to you. Try to charge a Medicare patient different what the government allows and see what happens to you. Try to charge a Medicaid patient at all and see what happens to you. So what freedom do we have in our country? We're over-regulated. The mileage in your car, the way your car is built, the way a factory functions, all of that is regulated by the government. Stray outside government regulation and see what happens. And so we conform ourselves to a box, and we'll wander around inside the box and think that we're free because we're allowed to wander about unencumbered within a box. The box the government creates for us. And we think we're free. People in the Soviet Union could take vacations. They could go down to the beach. They could go to the grocery store. They could drive their car whenever they could get one. They lived their lives for generation upon generation. No revolution there. In the United States, we're allowed to live within the government-created box. We think we're free because our box is a little bigger than the box of the Soviet Union. We think we're free. We're not free. We're as much enslaved as those in the Soviet Union. We stray outside the box. We take a drug the government says you must not take. You smoke inside the restaurant. You must not do so. You do anything, you try to charge a Medicaid patient a fair amount, a just amount, you must not do so. The government says so. Don't pay your taxes. See what happens to you. Don't pay your property taxes. Say goodbye to your property. Don't pay your Social Security taxes. Say goodbye to your freedom. How are we free in this nation? We live in a matrix world. We only see what the government allows us to see, and we think because we see that we're free. We're not free. When the government can come and take away your house and take away your car, take away your property. When the government tells the undelivered infant that the government can pay to take away your life, is that freedom? The murder of the innocent undelivered infant without due process, that is freedom? What freedom have the 60 million infants that were killed before delivery, what freedom did they experience in this land of the free? Okay, we have a minute. Jesus from San Juan. Thanks for calling. We only have a minute, so what do you have to say?
Oh, first of all, Doctor, this is you're doing a hell of a good show. You're a good show. My question to you is that, look, I was wondering, how can one prepare for anything, for anarchy or anything? Does the average person prepare?
Prepare for what?
Prepare for anything in life. You know, I mean, what do you think? I mean, that's going to happen.
I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mean, we have to look. I guess it's just your ability to predict on what's going to happen. If you think that the economy is going to fail or the government is coming. Okay, if you think the government is coming after you physically, then how do you prepare? Well, you have to prepare a place to hide from the government. I know it's kind of a simple example, but if you think the economy is going to collapse, how do you prepare? Historically, I'll get back to this after we have to go to a break. I'll continue with this after I come back. Thanks for calling. (710) KRV Talkback. Dr. Lawrence Gelman, home of the microphone, streaming live on KURV.com. 1-800-580-8255, 1-800-580-TALK. How do you prepare for the future? Well, I guess it's all the question of how good of what you are, of your resources that you have and what you predict is going to happen. For example, if you think the dollar is going to become worthless, then you would want to convert your currency from dollars to gold, for example. Why gold? Because historically, gold has maintained its value as other currencies have been devalued. But, how much gold can you buy? What are your resources? But of course, there's only a limit that you can do. How do you prepare against dying? Well, there are certain things you can't. You do the best you can, but ultimately you're going to lose. So if a country collapses, I'm not quite sure what you can do to protect yourself. Exactly, I don't know what the Romans did to protect themselves against the collapse of their society and then the subsequent invasions by nomadic tribes. So I guess it's just your ability to predict what is going to happen and then to base your decisions on that. But most of us tend to procrastinate, and even though we know that the country's coming to an end, we figure, well, it'll probably hang on for a few more years. And of course it will until the time comes when it doesn't. I imagine when the Roman Empire collapsed or the Byzantine Empire collapsed, that it was a big surprise to the people who were there at the time. And they probably were not as prepared as they, might wish to have been. So as an individual or for your family, the most you can do is if you think there's going to be a scarcity of food, stockpile food. If the dollar's going to be worthless, get some metal currency, silver, gold. Silver is good. Doesn't cost. You can buy a silver coin for, I don't know, what is it, $30, whatever it is these days, and stack up a bunch of those so that you'll have some purchasing power if the dollar disappears or if food becomes scarce or drinkable water becomes scarce or lodging. So I think the way I look at it, that the country is going to collapse inevitably on the present trajectory. But the thing is, I only can see what is happening now and try to extrapolate that into the future based upon its present course of action. And it's not that I'm clairvoyant, is that the course of action we're taking now is the exact same course of action in other countries. The trajectory of the country's course is the same as of other countries, other civilizations that have disappeared. The course that we're taking now is very similar to the Byzantine Empire, Roman Empire, probably other empires, and they collapsed. Soviet Empire, and it collapsed. So therefore, since our path is the same trajectory, the logical conclusion is we will also collapse. Now, does that mean it's inevitable? Well, no, it's not inevitable. It's not inevitable because the trend we take is a trend taken by man. It is something we voluntarily choose to do. We could change it if we had the gumption to do so or an understanding enough to do so. It's not inevitable. I mean, the valuation of the dollar is something man has done. It's not an act of God. The collapse of empires is something man did. It wasn't an act of God. And so if it's something man has done, then it can be undone by man. Can the United States be saved? Of course it can be saved. Will we take that path? Well, it doesn't look like it. Especially because we seem to be taking we're not changing our path from one to utter destruction. The destruction of the economy, the destruction of the elimination of freedom and liberty. I mean, our path is in the direction of reduced liberty, reduced freedom, reduced economic strength, reduced propriety. I mean, it's reduced morality, same-sex marriage, abortion of the undelivered infant. So our path seems to be more of one of greater immorality. And so when that happens, ultimately in those nations that have followed that path of immorality, of centralization of power, I get it eventually those countries collapse. I guess you can look at it like the black hole deal, where the centralization of all the matter results in a collapse of a star and a star system and the destruction of that system through the centralization process. Well, if that can happen to an entire solar system or a galaxy, the centralization of matter, the centralization causes the destruction of the solar system. then I imagine the centralization of the economy, which is much easier to do. Why wouldn't that result in the destruction of the economy in the country? And of course it will. And it's been proven over and over and over again. Centralization of power destroys ultimately. There's a process. In the beginning, it gives the appearance of strength, but ultimately it causes the destruction of a nation. When your power is centralized into a small group or a small group of people, eventually stagnation and collapse occurs. So I guess we're like solar systems. Maybe everything is all interconnected. We more in the Bible find interesting. I mean, believe in God or don't. It's up to you. But the Bible was written by human beings, maybe inspired by a greater power. And I do believe man is inspired by things beyond his or herself. But ultimately, I mean, it is written in terms of human understanding. I think that's one thing we need to understand, that those who think that this is something, that there is no God, I mean, if you want to defend God, I think not that God needs to be defended, I suppose. But remember, what is written through the eyes of human beings, through human understanding. And if it appears to be mundane, it is not because what inspires us is mundane. It is that we can only interpret it in a mundane manner. And so therefore, we have to look at it through the eyes of a human being. We're not looking at the world through the eyes of God. We're looking at it through the eyes of a human being. Before I do that, I got a caller, and I wanted to remark on that. They say, why am I blaming Barack Obama? I said Barack Obama could not coach a football team, but we want him to take care of the United States. And it's true. I mean, Barack Obama is an evil person, but Barack Obama is not the real problem. It's the people who look to Barack Obama to be the king. That is the problem. And I'm trying to say is that if Barack Obama cannot coach a high school football team, why look upon him to coach the United States entirely? But it's not Barack Obama that does it. It's the people who do it that want him to do it. That is where the problem really is. So thanks to that caller for enlightening me to that. Let's not blame Barack Obama. Let's blame the people who expect Barack Obama to be the coach of the United States when he cannot coach a football team. Mark chapter 12. Then they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement, him being Jesus. They came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are truthful and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not? Shall we pay or shall we not pay?" But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at." I guess that was a coin. They brought one. He said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar's." And Jesus said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were amazed at him. Now today we interpret that to mean that give unto government what is government's due, and give unto God what is God's due. Apparently a pacifist approach. In other words, do not go against government. Give government what is government's. Give God what is God's. Except what is God's and what is government's. And there is the problem. What Jesus is saying in the Bible is not to be pacifist, but to be moral. What is being said is, Do not sacrifice your moral values and your moral worth and righteousness. Do not sacrifice that to meet the demands of government. In other words, do not go under the philosophy, I was just following orders. We are human beings, and we need to understand what those choices are. We cannot absolve ourselves of the consequences of the choices that we make. If we seek to absolve ourselves by saying, I sent that person to the gas chamber because I was ordered to do so, and I did not look upon that person other than following the orders I was commanded to do. And so what the Bible tells us is that we have to protect ourselves from caving into the immoral in order to not be hurt by the government. If the government says to you, sacrifice your morality or I'll take your material good, well, the Bible is not saying sacrifice your material good and preserve your inner morality. That is not what it's saying. What it's saying is do not sacrifice your morality to protect your material good. If the government says to you that you must kill the Jews, and if you do not, I will incarcerate you and I will take away your material goods. The Bible says, do not forsake your morality in order to preserve your material goods. Well, the Bible is saying, give up your material goods, give up your freedom rather than give up your spiritual morality. That is the key. The saying, give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. Caesar's does not own your morality. Caesar's is not due your righteousness. Caesar's not due the sacrifice of what is good in order to preserve your material wealth. Give up your material wealth to preserve your sacredness. That is what is being said. Sacrifice your materialism, sacrifice your freedom in order to preserve your spiritual well-being. Caesar is not owed your spiritual well-being. Do not sacrifice your spiritual goodness and morality. Do not sacrifice that to Caesar to protect your material good. That is the point. The phrase, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and God to what is God's. Your morality is God's. Do not give to Caesar your morality to preserve your material goods. What it is not a statement of pacifism. It is a statement of resistance. Resistance to doing what is wrong in order to preserve your material good or your own freedom. That is what is being said. But that saying is perverted by those in government and Katie Couric and Dan Rather to make it appear that you give that government is owed that government is owed your loyalty, that government is owed your obedience, that government is owed your following their command. That is not what is meant here. The government is not owed your morality. The material goods, that is not heavenly. Give that to Caesar. Do not give Caesar your conscience to preserve your material goods. Give Caesar your money and not your righteousness. Do not be one who does bad simply by following orders. They want you to believe that that you are obligated to follow the orders of government, and that in doing so you forsake your morality. That somehow you are still if you do immoral act, but maintain an inner morality, that is still immoral. It doesn't matter whether if you know something is wrong and you do it anyway, because the government tells you to do it, you are not absolved of the immorality. And so do not just follow orders because you are told, because you are a slave to the government and you must do what the government says for fear of losing your freedom or your material goods. Because it is the material goods and maybe your freedom which can be confiscated and given to government. But your morality must not be given to government. You must not forsake your morality to government to preserve your freedom and material goods. All right, we have Fernando calling from somewhere, 7 KRV Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman. Thanks for calling. What do you have to say?
Yes, in the wisdom of Christ's answer there about give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, in the law it was stated that the earth is the Lord's and all things therein. And so those who understood the law at the time understood that Christ was telling him Caesar has nothing, and nothing is his, and give unto God that which is God's. Okay, and so not only that, this country was created and established on Judeo-Christian principles, which were principles of liberty, which the Lord preached and taught not only in his time on earth as a mortal, but previously in the Old Testament, it's replete with the Lord telling, teach liberty to your children and to their generation. You know, and so this thing about give Caesar unto Caesar, well, Caesar has nothing. Okay, this country was created, and government was created by the citizens, by the people, whom the Lord gave liberty to. And so that which is Caesar's is only that which the citizen gives to Caesar. And the obedience is because of a common accord, and our common accord was the Constitution of the United States.
Yes, that is exactly correct. The Judeo-Christian belief is one of free will, and therefore we make our own decisions and are responsible for the decisions that we make. That there is a authority beyond man, authority beyond government, and that is what government tries to subvert. Government wants to be the new God. The Constitution said that there is an authority higher than government, that man is to be free, that government is to be limited. That is why government hates the Constitution. Yes, you were going to say?
One of the reasons that we have a federal education system is exactly that, with the government's intent to, reduce people's belief in God and their understanding of the government as it was set up, the understanding of the Constitution. I remember when I was a kid, when prayer and Bible reading was taken out of school. Under what pretense, I don't even remember. I was too little to know, but I remember that there were a few people that were pretty upset about it, but not enough. And among those that were not upset about it enough were the ministers of the time. They had the power to turn the people from the pulpit against that action, and they didn't.
Well, they still have the power to do so and refuse to do it. And you're exactly correct that God was taken out of the school, the public school system, specifically to reduce the competition to government, because God is the competitor to government, and government does not want any competitors. The system of public education exists, as you have said, to indoctrinate us to believe that the government is benevolent and the government should be in control. But the question I have for you is that it is true at that time that the religious community, the institutionalized religious community, had the power to prevent the secularization, I guess, of the public school system, but they still have that power today. And my question is, why has it not utilized that power?
The reason that it has not utilized that power is because it was not allowed to. I remember in a civics class, I had a teacher who had been in the war, and they in their conquering Germany, came across some papers of plans for America, and part of the plans was to take over everything that had anything to do with teaching, and
right.
And one of those things was the educational system.
But in a revolution, do you need to be allowed to have your revolution? I mean, in the creation of the Christian religion and the spreading of the Christian religion, is it because they were allowed to do so, or did they fight to have their religion spread and their viewpoint spread? So what do you mean that the ministers are not allowed to do so? Of course, they're not going to be allowed to do so, but does that mean they shouldn't do so?
No. What I meant by that is their teaching, because the infiltration has been so complete in the educational system that even the places where the ministers are educated were infiltrated, and so the ministers did not have the understanding necessary to realize that they were part of the watchmen of the guards of the liberty of America, and they weren't awake enough to realize that this freedom that was being taken away from the people, and this was being instituted in the schools, was a hinge pin, so to speak, of the turning point in the taking of liberty from America.
So are you saying, just as our politicians don't have an understanding of the Constitution, are you saying that our ministers in their seminaries are not taught an understanding of the basis of the Bible and the religious teaching? Is that what you're saying? That they're being... Well, that's a very interesting statement to make. I'm not disagreeing with it. In fact, I agree with it. I mean, I've noticed that most of the young priests that I run into seem to be completely ignorant of anything but the superficialities of religion and really don't understand the basis of it. So
exactly. In during the '60s, I don't know if you're as old as I am, Doctor.
I was around in the '60s. I can tell you that.
Okay, you remember the sexual revolution?
Oh yeah.
What was heard from the pulpit?
Nothing.
Against it. Absolutely nothing.
Well, what's heard from the pulpit about the abortion of the undelivered infant?
And so the corruption has been complete, to the point that religion has been infiltrated by the enemy. And when that is, that one of the things that they had to do to be able to get to where they are today is exactly that. So we have a people that are asleep, that are totally ignorant and in the darkness about what's going on. I talked to a principal, school principal, probably about 10, 15 years ago now. I had an argument over a picture that my daughter drew of a stick figures in a gunfight. They found it and called the police. Okay, I asked the principal of the school if he had ever read the Federalist Papers, and I got this blank stare. I asked him, "Have you ever heard of the Federalist Papers?" And he said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Yeah, just now, right?"
Well, of course, but
that's part of the problem. The world, America is asleep.
Yes, I mean, I agree with that. At least a very significant proportion of the country is asleep, but of course that is intentional on the part of the government. The system of public education exists to indoctrinate. It doesn't exist to enlighten. And of course, those that are managing it, principals and teachers, have been indoctrinated into that kind of a culture. And if you ask the average teacher about anything along the founding of the country, they will express complete ignorance. They're much more interested in the how great North Korea is. But anyway, okay. Well, anything else?
Thank you, Dr. Gelman. That was it.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks for calling. Now we have Jack, 7 KRV, Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman. What's up, Jack? What do you got to say?
Well, I've been thinking about a lot of things you've been mentioning this morning and this afternoon. I am looking forward to an American Renaissance in the very near future. I'm also expecting that.
Why do you anticipate that's going to happen?
Well, I think that this present administration and the present economic conditions are going to wake up the American people.
Why do you think that? Are you saying that the choice of that worthless Mitt Romney was by the Republican Party is any evidence whatsoever of what you're asserting right now?
No. However, the American people have not suffered enough yet.
Why do you
to
talk?
Really wake them up.
What do you want? Self-flagellation? You're one of those kind of people? What kind of suffering do you want? Let me tell you something, Jack. Let's remember that the founding fathers were not poor people. They were in the upper echelon, okay?
True.
It's not a question of suffering because people will suffer. I mean, if it was a question of suffering, why haven't the people of Cuba revolted? So I don't think it's a question of suffering. It's a question of human understanding. Animals suffer without revolting. They accept it.
Right.
And human beings do exactly the same thing, unfortunately. So I think that the more I don't think it really matters how much the American people will suffer. They will continue to do so silently and stupidly and ignorantly, no matter how bad, because clearly the world has shown, if you go to Zimbabwe or Mozambique or the Soviet Union or many other countries, that people are willing to suffer a very, very great amount without lifting a finger. So the United States, I think you're making a mistake. I don't think it's a question of suffering that makes that's going to make a determination. It's a philosophical understanding. It's always a question of education, which is about as abysmal in this nation today as exists in anywhere in the world. We probably have the worst system of education in the world.
I agree with you, okay? And you've changed my mind about that because I think education is more important than the suffering. And you're right. People have a great, enormous capacity to suffer.
And self-delusion also.
That's true. But I'm looking forward to a renaissance in this country because not only do I think the people are being educated, you
know why there's not going to be a renaissance? You want me to tell you why? Because first of all, most Americans can't spell it. Okay? And so if they can't, when they learn how to spell it, then maybe they'll do it. But until they learn how to spell, it's not going to happen. And the way things are going, less people can spell renaissance today than could spell it a year ago.
But I also see something else going on. I hear it on your program too, Doctor. The people are discussing what's going on in the Catholic Church. They're discussing what's going on in Christianity and how Christians are silent. And I think that right there is a silver thread that I see a Christian.
But the silence is getting worse. The silence is getting more profound. The Catholic Church could lead a revolution in the world that could eliminate abortion tomorrow if they wish to do so, but they don't wish to do so. When was the last time you heard the topic of the abortion of the undelivered infant spoken from the pulpit? Jack, you can hang on if you want. I have to go to a break.
I will.
710 KRV, Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, holding a microphone. Be back after this short break. Seventh KRV Talkback, Dr. Lawrence Gelman. We were talking about the church, primarily the Catholic Church, and of course it's always easy to point a finger at someone else and say they're not doing enough when what is it that the rest of us are doing? What is it the medical community is doing about these issues? And nothing. Quite the contrary. They seem to be helping the government and to enslave and the American people. The church has lasted a great period of time, and there must be a reason it has done so. It has been survived the ravages of communism and Nazism and fascism, and so clearly there is something there important in the teachings which is beyond that is something beyond general human understanding. Something that goes beyond the day-to-day mundane materialistic affairs that we're involved with. So I think people look to it as something, as a salvation for the human soul and the human psyche. And so it's easy for someone on the outside to to expect some type of, to ask someone else to do something. Well, we ought to do it ourselves first before we ask others. And so the church has survived attacks, attempts to eliminate and destroy the church in many countries, and it is under assault in the United States as well. But it is under assault because it is good. It is under assault by governments because it stands between the enslavement of the people and between the government, which is to enslave the people and the people. And it is there standing as a shield, pretty much alone in our society today and in many societies throughout the world and throughout time, as a shield, at least spiritually, against a government which wishes to enslave. It's a very daunting task, and we're glad that it is doing so. I think if you compare that to other institutions that have caved into the government, such as the American Medical Institution, for example, which has caved into the government, and other institutions which have caved into the government for their self-preservation, it would be easy for the church to cave in on the issues of abortion or homosexuality and things like that. But they refuse to do so, and they have paid a very large price for refusing to do so. But their integrity it means more to them, to the church itself. Its integrity means more than the benefits that the government would bestow upon them if they would just toe the line. But what can be said in defense of the church is that rather than receive the benefits of government and forsake its underpinnings, that it will stick to its ideology and maintain the truth as it understands the truth to be, and not cave in to the strong-arm tactics of government. It survived the terrorism of the Soviet Union. It's surviving the terrorism of the Communist Chinese, and it does so because of its adherence to its underlying principles, and that's something I think that all of us could learn something from, that they would rather accept the privations by a government and will stand up to the threats of a government, rather do that than take the easy way out and cave in, as so many other institutions have, including the institution I belong to, which is the American medical community, which has cravenly caved into government demands, where now the American medical community supports abortion of the undelivered infant on demand, supports the enslavement of the people through the American government's programs, supports the distribution of birth control and other means of limiting procreation artificially. So I guess it is because we honor the teachings of the institution. But in reality, what other institution do we honor? Do we honor the government or any of its components? Of course not, because it is dishonorable. And so there are very few institutions which are based upon honor and integrity and the sacredness of human life. In fact, I'm not sure there are any other organizations, certainly not the American medical community, which is really something to say when the American medical community, it no longer honors the sanctity of life. Okay, let's go back to Jack, Southern KRV. Thanks for calling. What's your comment?
My final comment is this. As the U.S. federal government collapses, I believe the American people of the sovereign state are going to gather a greater strength, and we're also going to need voices like yours, because
Jack, what evidence do you have historically that has ever happened? It's kind of a natural. It's kind of like a natural history, or like almost like a natural law. It's like I was talking about the destructions of galaxies, which seems to be a unidirectional path. There doesn't seem to be any way around it. The great empires, if you look at the Romans or the Byzantines or any other great empire, It started off very similar to what the United States started off, and then it actually got stronger for a period of time as power centralized. And eventually the centralization was so great and the people were so enslaved that you really didn't have a country or a nation, so to speak. You had a government and enslaved people, and eventually it collapsed. So my question to you is, what historically have you ever seen, and I'm not saying it's not the case, I just would be curious to know, in which there has been a reversal of the trend that the United States is in today? I mean, in that the nation goes back to the principles of its founding. Usually it requires the complete and utter destruction of the central power in order for the independent members of a nation to reassert their original values.
I believe that the sovereign states will assert their value, their original values, and if you look at the former Soviet Union, okay, it broke up into their individual sovereign states. I believe that that's what we're going to do, and I believe that we need to take control at the state and county level.
I understand what you're saying, but what happened in the Soviet Union, unfortunately, is not the case. It would have been the case, but you know who prevented it? George H.W. Bush. The Soviet Union was on the verge of a complete breakup into independent states. Even though there has been some breakup, essentially the Soviet Union, for the most part, remains intact. And the reason it remains intact, and also the reason that the satellite states, which have broken off, such as the Ukraine and others, have been taken over by dictators, is directly the fault of the United States. It was George Bush which funneled, and not only George Bush, but Bill Clinton as well, which funneled billions and billions of dollars into the ex-Soviet Union and the surrounding states, ostensibly to preserve and protect the nuclear arsenal so it wouldn't be disseminated to the nuts of the world, though I don't know how a nut of the world could launch a missile, but let's just say. And so George Bush funneled a lot of money into the Soviet Union, as did Bill Clinton, to give them the means to retain control by paying the military and paying other entities and having the funds to maintain their stranglehold on much of the Soviet Union. The same way the United States gave money to the Soviet Union after World War II and the Red Chinese after World War II to give them the means to strangle and enslave their peoples. And so I understand what you're saying. If the United States had not been involved, the Soviet Union probably would have broken up into a bunch of independent states, would have been better off than they are now. I guess what you're saying, and I hope it will be true, that the United States will break up into regions or independent states, which will then give more freedom to the people in those states. That would be great. It would be great if the states, a couple of reasons. One, I would like Texas to be independent, and I would like Texas to be independent of New York, among other things, in Washington, D.C. Why do people of Texas? Why do people of Texas accept to be under the control of Al Sharpton or Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi is amazing to me. Why can't the state of Texas be a free and independent nation? I imagine that's what you're talking about. So that's what you're hoping. There'll be a breakup of the United States. I think that's going to happen one way or another. That in the United States will, and the sooner the better. But I do believe that will happen in the United States. I'm not sure. I think it'll be involuntarily done. There'll be a breakup because of a great economic catastrophe. And then who knows what's going to happen. But I do believe the only salvation we have is a breakup of the country into separate regions, separate states. Really, why should a nation of over 300 million people be under the control of a bunch of empty-headed idiots in Washington, D.C.?
Amen.
Okay, Jack, thanks for calling. Okay, why should any state, have its future dictated to by individuals such as Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi? Nancy Pelosi doesn't belong to your state. knows nothing about your state. Why should Nancy Pelosi be in charge of what goes on in any other state? Why should Chuck Schumer be in charge of what goes on in any other state? Why should Hillary Clinton determine America's foreign policy? Why should your sons and daughters be sacrificed upon the altar of political expediency built by Bill and Hillary Clinton? Why should the way we function be dependent upon dictates from a central government which is immoral and degenerate? Now we have Mildred calling from McAllen, 7 KRV. Thanks for calling, Mildred. What do you have to say?
I just want to thank you for the beautiful stained glass windows up at the museum.
Wow. When were you there?
I was there about 2 weeks ago.
Yes. Did you see the previous exhibit that they took down?
Yes, I had, and I loved it. And then when I heard you talking on the radio, and you said that it was now the largest display in the United States, of course I couldn't wait to get up there. And I am thrilled with it, and I would like to find out, how did you collect all of that, and where did you get it all from?
Oh, well, it's been a project that's consumed well over 20 years. I didn't begin intentionally. I fell in love with stained glass when I started to understand it a little bit better. It is an amazing medium of communication. I never thought any of this would be available. I mean, it's funny how things are, because I always thought that these are works of art that are so beautiful and so intricate that I figured they were not going to be available, that they would only be in institutions. And was I surprised to find out that these windows were available for purchase, and really not anywhere near as expensive as I thought they would otherwise be, because a lot of people don't really care to own iconography of a religious orientation. And so what happened is that since there aren't very many people who collect or deal with this stuff, I got to know the 2 or 3 individuals in the United States that did salvage work and did this kind of work. And so whenever some of this becomes available, they call me, and if it's something I can afford and something that I like, I go and see if I can get it. But it does take a lot of work, and it is a collection that has taken me a long time, my wife and I, a long time to accumulate. And I do think it's something that people ought to see. It's an art form that is really kind of disappeared from the United States and much of the rest of the world. It's very hard. There are very few locations. As far as I'm aware, I think there's only 3 stained glass museums in the United States at the present time that I'm aware of. There's one in Orlando, Florida, which is the Tiffany Museum, the Morse Museum. There's one in Chicago, which is a horrendously done museum with improper display of the windows. And that's all I know. So what we have here in McAllen, in my mind, is as good. The windows that we have here are as good as anywhere in the world. The windows on display, there may be windows which are as good, but there are no windows which are better. This is the finest display examples of Tiffany window craftsmanship as exists anywhere in the world.
The coloring is just unbelievable. It is, and the way they're displayed, I absolutely love it. I can just go up there and sit on the benches and look.
Yeah, well, I agree 100%, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm just going to announce that a little bit. Thanks for calling, Mildred. These windows, the exhibit I had before, which was taken down, I don't understand why, but whatever, which was the finest example of Lamb Window Studios production that exists anywhere in the world. We had 10 of the finest Lamb Studio windows that were ever created. They were over 100 years old. That exhibit was up for 4 or 5 years, was taken down by the new guy who's running the place. But then again, it was the museum that allowed me to exhibit these windows, so I thank them for that. Now I have the subsequent exhibit is entirely Tiffany windows. I think there's 20 of them or so. They are as good a Tiffany windows as you will see anywhere in the world. They're not the largest windows, but they're, as far as the quality of the glass, they're as good as any and better than most. But stained glass artisanship is underappreciated in the United States and the world. It is a important art form, an important form of communication. The technology that goes into it and the art that goes into creating those windows has been lost. They were created by geniuses. Those geniuses are no longer with us, and the way they did it has been lost to modern man, or to this generation, let's say. The exhibit is at the McAllen Museum of Fine Arts. It is open 6 days a week. The admission is inexpensive. It's a few dollars. The exhibit is there's none better anywhere in the world. It is a brilliant display of color, glass, and light, which takes your breath away when you walk into the room. And I thought it was, to me, this is something that should be viewed by everybody. That is something that is inspiring, that is a beautiful art form that is hard to display. You can take a painting and hang it up on a wall, and it's easy enough to do. Shine a little light bulb on it, then you're fine. But if you do, to display, and I can tell you the way that the windows are displayed, the people at the McAllen Museum of Arts and Sciences, International Museum of Arts and Sciences in McAllen, the people who work there, the people who have put it on display, have done an amazing job, an incredible job, better than any other display I've seen anywhere else in the United States or outside of a natural setting. And so you have to hand it to their craftsmanship and ability in lighting and in displaying these forms of art, which is not easy to do. It is hard to do. The lighting of these windows is a difficult project because the windows are thick and complex. They're very heavy, and there's a lot of nuances within them which are hard to display outside of natural light. But they have done an exemplary job. So anyone who wants to go should go see it. I think it's well worth seeing. I can tell you, if this exhibit was in New York City, there'd be lines around the block waiting to get in. We have a call from Will calling from Harlingen. Thanks for calling, 7 KRV.
Hey, Doctor.
Yeah.
I just want to, like I said, I listen to you every week, and I agree with everything you say. I just want to let you know I'm a member of the Methodist Church in Harlingen, First Time Methodist Church, and we have 6 of the most beautiful stained glass windows that you could ever imagine. And I don't know if you've ever seen them or not.
No, but I will now. It's the Methodist Church in Harlingen.
They're like 20 foot by probably 8 or 10, and we just renovated them about 2 years ago, and the church is 100 years old, and they're just the most beautiful stained glass you've ever seen.
Which Methodist church is that?
The First United Methodist Church on Harrison. On Harrison, and they're beautiful.
Well, I'm going to go there this week, and is it open like? When is it open? The church?
Come
besides
tomorrow.
Mass.
We have services at 9:15 and 11 o'clock.
On what, Sunday or when, or every day or what?
On Sunday, but Pastor Dave, you could go there anytime, but you would be really impressed.
No, I believe you. I absolutely believe you. I just, these days I've often gone to churches to look at windows and found the doors closed. So
I'll try to make sure that get in contact with the pastor, and I'm sure he'll make sure that everything's good.
Okay, I'll just get it online, and I'll look it up, and I'll make a point of doing it. And thanks for calling, because my wife, I remember one time she told me I would go to like New York or Philadelphia or Chicago. She says, while we're here, why don't we go look at the churches? I mean, they're not in the guidebook. Let's go look at the churches and look at stained glass. And it's true. In Philadelphia and Germantown, there's a church with I think it's a Presbyterian church. Amazing stained glass windows. And I'll let you know, because if you're interested, in Germantown and Philadelphia is a Presbyterian church. In Chicago, there's the Second Presbyterian Church on Michigan Avenue near McCormick Place down south of Michigan Avenue. That has magnificent Tiffany windows and other windows. In Boston, at the Boylston Street Church, there's a great Tiffany windows. In New York, on 99th and West End Avenue, there's St. Michael's Church, which is an Episcopalian church, which has just fantastic windows. And these are not in the guidebooks. No one ever looks up this stuff in the guidebooks.
Dr. Gelman, yeah, they're just hidden little gems, is what they are.
Yes, that's exactly right. The thing is that, like the Presbyterian Church in Chicago is open for one Mass on Sunday, otherwise it's closed. And so with the state of affairs with the religious community these days, oftentimes in these churches, they're closed most of the time. So there are these treasures which are out there, which no one even knows about. And but thanks for calling, because I will definitely go take a look at those windows. And if you haven't seen the windows in the IMAS Museum here in McAllen, you need to look at it and then compare those windows to the windows that you see, you call back and we can discuss the different styles of stained glass construction. So thanks for calling. I'm running out of time here. All right, thanks for that. Anyone else out there who knows of these gems? Churches are great storehouses of art and inspirational art. And anyone out there who knows about any of these hidden gems, not just here in Texas, but elsewhere in the United States, let me know. And I think we're going to have a program on this issue maybe next week, discuss some of these things which are not discussed anywhere else. Thanks for calling. 7 KRV Talkback. Dr. Lawrence Gelman. Thanks for listening. Be back next week. Bye.